Hey, welcome back to Boxes and Bubbles for Read This, number 3. This week we're trying something a bit different. I moved my camera to another place. I wasn't really comfortable with it right up in my face, but also my place is very small and there are not that many choices of where to put it, but we'll give it a try from up here. Alright, let's jump into it with DC Comics with Poison Ivy number 3. Written by G. Willow Wilson, with art by Marcio Takada, colors by Arif Prianto, and letters by Hassan Othmani El Hao. This series is great. It's the best Poison Ivy that I've ever seen. The first 2 issues follow her as she is traveling across America, and she's decided that she's gonna bring about genocide using fungal spores that come out from her body. So she's been traveling around and she's been spreading those spores. And as she's been doing that, she's been thinking back on her relationship with Harley. And she's kind of saying to herself like, I want to forget everything that isn't her. So it seems like maybe they've broken up, and it seems like the genocide that she's about to do, she knows that it's going to kill Harley wherever she is, and maybe she's okay with that. In the second issue, she started to think that somebody was following her around. She went outside of a diner she was in and she saw like a rune on the wall, and she thought that maybe somebody following her is giving her a message to tell her that they're on her tail. So picking up in issue 3, she stops off at a roadside motel. And it has a garden that the owner is trying to make, but it's not so good, and she spends the issue helping the owner spruce up the garden and plant lots of different plants. But all the while that she's doing that, thinking about how much of a nice time she's having creating this garden, in the back of her mind is the genocide that she's planning. And that's what makes this series so creepy, is that she's being so nice and friendly. She's talking to people, she's meeting people, but in the back of her mind, she always has her plan. So she's like this awful, terrifying sociopath that's on one hand enjoying company and appreciating humanity, on the other hand knowing that she is about to cause the downfall. It's super interesting and it's so dark and feels so cynical and creepy. I love it. This is definitely my favorite take on Ivy that I've ever seen. It's kind of like an eco-horror, psychological thriller take. It's so chilling. And quite a different take on a Batman villain too. I've never seen a Batman book where the villain is really planning something horrendous. Usually they're gonna kill somebody, they're gonna do some kind of crime, or they're gonna steal something. They're gonna mess with Gotham. This is the first time I've seen one of Batman's villains decide they're gonna do something that will affect the entire world, and it's really gripping. The plot only inches forward like the tiniest bit in this issue, but the entire thing is really compelling because we know her plan, and the characters that she's meeting don't. It's deeply sinister, and it's amazing. Next up, Batman 126, written by Chip Zdarsky, art by Jorge Jimenez, colors by Tomeu Morey, and letters by Clayton Cowles. So last issue, Chip Zdarsky and Jorge Jimenez took over Batman. They're the new creative team, and so the story is changing direction, and now the Penguin has decided he wants to take out the rich elite from Gotham. Batman and Robin went to a party that he was going to attack, and Robin got shot. The epilogue to that was a suit of armor that Batman had made coming to life on its own. And this issue continues from there. But what's so great about this one is that the threat is so big that Batman calls all the other members of the Bat family to come and help him. And they all show up really quickly. I've only been reading comics for about 6 years at this point, but this is the first time I've seen the entire Bat family come together at one time to deal with one threat. And everybody just arrives. There is the classic thing of somebody showing up to save the day just in time, but it goes completely sideways, and that felt like a breath of fresh air to see that trope go wrong. So you have the entire Bat family fighting against this suit of armor, and they get wrecked. And it's great to see because it really sets this thing up to be very dangerous and for the stakes to be quite high, because in the long run, usually you know Batman is going to win, right? And even in this case too, I don't see a future where Batman ultimately loses. But for there to be a threat that's this big that it's difficult for him to win, it's going to be fun to watch how he goes about that. And that's literally the entire issue. The fight lasts the entire issue, but it's paced so nicely, and the artwork by Jorge Jimenez is so cool. So it's not the kind of fight that feels like a throwaway or panels of people punching each other just for the sake of it. It really has weight and gravity to it, and it feels like this is a threat that's going to be around for a while. At the end of the issue, Bruce does something really odd. I don't know what he's going for and what his plan is, so I'm really curious next issue to see what that's all about and how they're going to deal with Failsafe. Next, Batman White Knight presents Red Hood. The story was by Sean Murphy, the script was by Clay McCormick, art is by Simone DeMeo, with colors by Simone DeMeo on pages 1 to 5, and after that, Dave Stewart takes over the coloring. And the letters are by AndWorld Design. This is such a nice, cheerful book, but the beginning is a little bit dark. We got Jason Todd with the Joker, and Jason Todd tells the Joker Batman's identity. So where we're at now in the Batman White Knight series, Batman is in prison, and I'm guessing that's because of this exchange. Everybody finds out who Bruce Wayne is, and he gets locked away. And in this book, Jason Todd's feeling guilty about that. He hasn't got over what he did. So later on in the issue, when somebody claiming to be Robin stops him in an alleyway, he kind of makes fun of her at first. But she asks him to train with him, and eventually he decides, actually, yeah, he's gonna do it. He's gonna train her to be a better Robin. So the rest of the book is basically a training montage. It's him teaching her how to be better at everything. But it's also him realizing how to be a better teacher. At first he tries to train her like he was trained, and then he realizes, well, you're a different person than me. You've got different abilities and different physical strengths. I need to teach you the way that you need to be taught. So a lot of this book is about him softening and kind of adapting to his new situation, but he's also doing it as kind of a redemption for himself, to alleviate himself of his guilt. The girl that he's training to be the new Robin is so cheerful and excited to be doing what she's doing. It's really infectious. She's a fun character, and the entire book, though it starts a bit dark and Jason Todd starts off a bit grumpy, it's a really cheerful, funny, happy kind of book. Early on in the issue, the new Robin is not so great at what she's trying to do, but eventually she starts to get better, and that's where the book ends. And it's going to be really nice to see how this turns out. It's a lovely series to read, and also Simone Di Meo's artwork is always gorgeous. But often, the way that they color it seems to make things a little bit fuzzy. They give it this kind of motion blur effect that sometimes makes it difficult to read and follow for me. In this book, Dave Stewart takes over coloring Simone Di Meo's work, and it looks amazing. I actually much prefer their work with somebody else's coloring on top of it. So this book, as well as being really light-hearted and a nice read, is gorgeous to look at as well. And lastly from DC, Aquaman Andromeda #2, written by Ram V, with art by Christian Ward, and letters by Aditya Bidikar. This series looks so amazing. Like, we got Ram V on writing, who, as I mentioned before, is getting some real acclaim to his name, and it's well deserved. He's a really good writer. And there's also Christian Ward's artwork, which is gorgeous. There's a style I can't quite put my finger on. It's not quite painted, but it has texture to it, and it has this look that's kind of somehow fluid, like the paint isn't dry or something, and it fits so nicely with the underwater setting. So this series, though it's an Aquaman series, the first issue focuses more on this crew that's going under the water to excavate a ship that has fallen into like a dead zone. So there's like a space shuttle that's fallen into the ocean, and it's following this crew going down there to try and get out whatever's inside. What's so cool is that it has a feel of sci-fi about it. It's similar to a space exploration book, in that they're going somewhere where they shouldn't be going. It's difficult for humans to survive there, but instead of being in space, it's under the ocean. While the crew is down there, the ship that dropped them off above the water is attacked by a kraken, which is then beaten by Aquaman. In this issue, they finally meet Aquaman, who tells them that they shouldn't be on this ship, and he tells them what the ship is there for. So it turns out this ship is actually an Atlantean prison ship. What's funny is for them to keep their prisoners, instead of keeping them under the water, they shoot them into space, which is about as far away from the ocean as you can get. So in this issue, we find out what that ship was meant to contain and why it's so dangerous. The appearance of Aquaman in this is so cool. I've never seen a design like this for him before. He looks a lot more like a kind of fantasy fairy tale creature. His skin is kind of green-gray, he's got a big beard, and he looks really stern and serious. It's a super cool design. And also, Black Manta shows up in this too, and Christian Ward just makes him look so cool. Really, I can't overstate how gorgeous the artwork is in this. Ram V is true to form too, with his writing being as eloquent and poetic as always. It's almost prose in some points. My only gripe, if you can call it that, with this series is that the next issue is the last one, and it's such a bummer because I could read this forever. Next, we're on to Image and The Closet, #3, written by James Tynion IV, with art by Gavin Fullerton, colors by Chris O'Halloran, and letters by Tom Neapolitano. So if you haven't been reading it, this is a horror drama book that follows a family. There's a dad, there's a young son, and there's the wife. Each issue begins following the dad. He is a major screw-up. He is so thoughtless and so unaware of his situation at every turn. He's a terrible father, he's a terrible partner, and none of it is because he's done anything that's particularly bad. Besides just being so thoughtless, he doesn't seem to really be able to think about his wife or his son. He just thinks about what he wants to do all the time, and he doesn't realize how his actions affect them. Every night when his son goes to bed, he sees this monster in his closet. And in the first issue, the family are moving. So the dad tells the son, "We're moving away from here. We're moving away from this closet. This monster's not going to follow you anymore." But in issue 2, when they do finally start to move from one place to the other, they stop at his friend's house and the boy sees the monster there. After issue 2, I figured out exactly what the metaphor or the allegory in this story was, and I felt kind of smart because I worked it out by myself. Issue 3 really underlines it for you though. If you didn't get it from the first 2 issues, this one kind of beats you over the head with it so that you get it. So for me, because I worked it out by myself, I felt like it was a bit on the nose, but I can also see how some people might need a little bit of a hand, especially given that this is the last issue. It ends kind of abruptly, but actually I think it makes its point and it said what it's trying to say, and it ends in the perfect place because there's no real ending to this story that's going to be satisfying. It's done what it needs to do. It's just kind of telling you this is the message that this story is giving you. I don't really want to give that away because A, anybody reading it might not have figured it out for themselves, and B, the entire point of the book is to make you think about it and kind of work it out for yourself by the end. It's a great horror story, but it's an even better family drama, and it's so perfectly done. The main character isn't hateable because he's done anything that's terrible. He's not like a morally awful person. It's just that he's not thinking about things. And he's selfish, and he doesn't even know that he's selfish. So he's not a character that as a reader we hate, because we can understand his mistakes. The things that he's done are completely relatable, but it's also so frustrating to see him be completely oblivious to those things, be told directly by one of his friends about how much he's messing all of this up, and he still just doesn't get it. This is a really amazing emotional story, though it's not a very happy one. I would definitely recommend anyone to read it, especially if they're thinking about having kids, or if you have kids already. The message here is super strong and well worth reading. Next, Stillwater number 14, another one written by Chip Zdarsky, art by Ramon K. Perez, colors by Mike Spicer, and letters by Russ Wooten. So this series is about a town in which nobody can die, or not for long. You can die in this town, but you'll come back to life pretty quickly. But that also means that they don't age. They've been stuck at the same ages for decades. At the beginning of the series, a mother's estranged son comes back to the town, and it's about him finding out its secret and being allowed to stay there while trying to get his mom out because she wants to escape. And the reason that it's on my list is because the story has changed so much from back then. We're at issue 14 now, and for a series that seemed to have only like a limited amount of ideas that it could use, it's managed to take what it's doing and then expand it. And that's a good word to use because now the town is expanding itself. First, Stillwater was the only town that had all this going on, and they haven't let any of the residents leave because they don't want anyone else to find out about what's happening. But now, in this issue, they're expanding Stillwater to the neighboring town. That means they're expanding the borders and they're pretty much annexing this new town. The leader of all of this is somebody who's been a child for 40 years. So you've got this kid who's leading this expansion of this town over into the next one, and he's setting up guards at the perimeter, and they're really not going to let anybody go outside. So what felt like a series before that might have been wrapping up, now it seems like a whole new arc is starting, and I don't know where it's going to go from here. But it seems like Chip Zdarsky has some great ideas, so now I'm really curious to find out what happens to this new town and these new people. I was just so surprised and impressed to find out there's more to this story than I thought, and that it's still so entertaining. Next, we're on to Aftershock and The Vineyard number 1, written by Brian Hawkins, art by Sami Kivella, colors by the amusingly named Jason Wordy, and letters by Taylor Esposito. This is the debut issue of this book, and it's about a family that lives together on a vineyard. A vineyard that's very successful, but they owe their success to a god to whom they're giving sacrifices. It's Dionysus, the god of wine. At the beginning of the book, it's the mom's turn to make a sacrifice to the god, and she can't go through with it. She has to ask her son to do it. And that's the source of the tension in the story. The dad is a devout worshipper of Dionysus, but due to him having an accident, he's unable to carry out his duties. The wife was going to be the one to pick those up, but because she was unable to do it, now their son is involved in all of this. And where the mother feels ashamed and she's upset that she had to force her son to do it, the father is actually proud and happy to have his son following in his footsteps. Added to that, the mum is actually really unhappy on the vineyard and she wants to run away. So she makes a phone call to her daughter, who is also living somewhere else. She's not on the vineyard with them, and she's telling her that she wants to leave. As I mentioned previously, they have to make sacrifices to Dionysus 4 times a year. And the next one is coming up, and of course, the mother can't do it, the father can't do it, so it's the son's turn. And the book ends with him finding a new victim to sacrifice to Dionysus. The story in this book feels so unusual. It's a book that involves gods, but actually the gods don't appear in this book yet. And it could very well be that they don't appear at all. So it's on one hand a family drama, and on the other hand this kind of supernatural, maybe psychological thriller. I just like the idea a lot of having a god be used, but one that's not really used so often. And to not have the god appear directly makes it really difficult to tell if they are actually there or not. But I guess we'll find out as the series continues. Next, we're on to AWA Upshot with Sacrament number 1, written by Peter Milligan, with art by Marcelo Frusin, and letters by Sal Cipriano. This one is super interesting. Usually in sci-fi, the setting is a post-religion world, right? But this book takes place in the time between mankind setting out for the stars and religion going away. So it's at a time period where religion is pretty much fizzling out, and it's also being stomped out by the authorities. And this book follows a priest who's been going around doing exorcisms, though he doesn't really believe in God anymore, and he doesn't believe in the exorcisms either. And at the beginning of the book, he does an exorcism on a girl that he is thinking internally is just poisoned. It's not really a demon that's taken over her body. She's just sick because she's being forced to work around toxic chemicals and stuff. Throughout the rest of the book, we follow him around to different places where he's doing sermons and being chased around by the authorities. And at one point, he's almost caught. And he's so disillusioned with his entire life and his faith now that he actually wants to be caught. But when he does get caught, the authorities offer him a chance to get out of jail by doing a favor for them. They want him to perform an exorcism. And of course he doesn't believe in those kind of things really, so he's happy to do it. Though he kind of wanted to go to jail to escape the monotony of his job. So they take him to the place where he's going to do this exorcism, and the person he's about to exorcise has grown horns and really does look like they're possessed by a demon. And that's where the issue ends. Personally, I'm not religious at all, but I really like the idea of having a sci-fi that's set in that time between religion going away and a post-religious society. It's also really interesting to read about a person of faith who's losing their faith, and I think a large part of that is because he's been so zealous and he's been doing these exorcisms, and each time he's known really logically that what he's doing is meaningless and that there's some deeper underlying reason that these people need help. And then it twists again at the end, because in this society where religion is gone and people don't believe in demons anymore, there seems like there really is one. It's also written really nicely. Peter Milligan has a really good way of writing this character, so I'm excited to see where this one goes because it's very interesting. The artwork and colors fit the story really nicely too. There's a lot of like steely grays and blues and really cool spaceship designs. The story and the artwork work together so perfectly. And lastly, onto Marvel, New Fantastic Four #3, written by Peter David, art by Alan Robinson, colors by Mike Spicer, and letters by VC's Joe Caramagna. This series is so fun and lighthearted, especially for a series that's about demons. If you haven't been reading it, a demon showed up in Vegas, and somehow that attracted Joe Fixit, Spider-Man, Wolverine, and the Human Torch. Ghost Rider is also there, but he's been underground talking to one of the demons. In this issue, the Human Torch has been taken over by a demon, and he becomes this really cool blue demonic Human Torch. When he touches people, they don't burn, they just get really cold and have terrible recollections of their pasts. Ghost Rider has been tied up by the demon that he was talking to, and so the priest needs to go and help rescue him. And Wolverine and Spider-Man are busy trying to fight off this demon Human Torch. Elsewhere though, Doctor Strange shows up to warn the rest of the Fantastic Four about what's coming, and he finally explains what the word syzygy means, which we've been hearing in the first 2 issues. So while that doesn't sound like a lot's going on in this issue, it's so fun to read. Peter David really has a way of making his stories a quick, fun read, and this is no exception. So if you're looking for something light-hearted, but that feels like it has enough weight not to be just a throwaway, this is really great. And that's it for another one. Those are the best books I read last week. As always, if you like this video, take a look around the rest of the channel for some more spoiler-free reviews, or give me a follow on Twitter @BoxesandBubbles to hear about these comics as I read them, and the ones that don't make it into the video each week. As much as I don't like to beg, if you want to help me out, share this around to your friends and give me a sub. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again next time. Bye bye!